Call the meeting to order at 5:30. Some announcements, save the date, the fall special town meeting is expected to take place on Monday, November 3rd. There's a planning board public hearing regarding proposed MBTA zoning bylaw and districts on Tuesday, October 7th at 7 p.m. in the first floor hearing room. And also the remote link, that's a hybrid meeting. And we have several openings on town boards and committees. Check out the volunteer tab on the town webpage. First item is public comment. Anybody here wishing to make a public comment? All right. Item B, town manager updates.
All right, item A, the FY25 audit fieldwork. We had the auditing team on site most of last week. Seemed to go very well. We never know really how it went until we get the written findings, but I think the team was able to be fully responsive to every document. I think I've told the board this before, but I'll restate it. We've been very favorably pleased by the approach of the new firm. Back when we met with them in June, they had set out a lengthy but very specific list of all the reports, documents, so on and so forth. Over the summer, our team was able to upload just about everything. And that really made the field work much more efficient because they had everything. It's all through a shared server, very clear record keeping of what was needed, what was provided. So I think we're, very pleased at the relationship. And so we do have a follow-up meeting, Jenny and Caitlin and myself, about 2 weeks out, just to kind of recap if there's anything from their field visits they want to talk about further. There are a couple of issues we'd like to talk about further. I think the items we've touched on with regard to the trusts. But yeah, that work is done and that's great. One other thing that's not directly related but similar. I don't know if you guys are on the listserv for we get regular updates from Mass DOR, Department of Revenue, Division of Local Services, and there was one that came out yesterday. I don't know if you saw this, Amanda, but it was basically, I assume it was sent to all municipalities across the Commonwealth. It was saying that as of this date, the department that is statewide is well behind what they are used to seeing on cities and towns submitting for free cash certification. And I think it said that they're like 19 behind. And so they're basically saying like, get on it. As you know, our free cash has been certified for some time. So I just want to, recognize the team and Jenny in particular. It just was a reminder of, that's not normal.
Right.
Like really working at a high level. So that's great. Next item, the open space and recreation plan, action plan. There was some, I think, very productive dialogue between the open space committee and other contributors. And I think that led to, some adjustments that I think look good. So that was submitted to the state ahead of the September 30th deadline. And we actually heard back within about a day and a half that they had accepted that and have approved the status of the OSRP, the Open Space and Rec Plan, as being current through calendar year 2028. So that preserves the town's eligibility for a whole range of grant programs. So that's very positive and a lot of good work by the Open Space Committee and others who contributed, including, of course, this board. Bid process for pickleball construction. We have issued the invitation for bid. This well above the threshold for public bidding. So this needed to go into the newspaper as well as the Central Register, which is a statewide list that contractors subscribe to and get updates. It's also available at public libraries and so forth. So that hit the streets, so to speak, yesterday morning. Bids are due on the 15th of the month, which is a pretty quick turnaround. So we're hopeful that we'll get bids and we'll be able to get someone under contract and go forward with the timeline that we've been aiming for all along. If for whatever reason we either don't get bids or we don't get satisfactory bids, obviously we could always pull it back and rebid it over the winter for a spring start. But goal all along has been to break grounds this fall, to get the base course of paving in, so it can go over the winter. And, we're continuing to, move forward on that basis. I want to definitely commend, Caitlin Barker as our procurement officer, as well as other staff. Both Brian and Butch contributed a great deal to the substance of it. We got some help from, Rich Williams on, the construction specs, to try to make it as clear as we could. It's a lengthy document. I think I said to the board in the submittal, I'd hoped we could do a more succinct purchasing document, because I could envision some prospective contractors getting daunted just by the legalese. But that is all required under procurement law. That's what the public bid project looks like. So we are hoping that with the pre-bid meeting next week, that people will show up, ask questions, and we can try to make sure that they focus on kind of the scope and the timeline, and not get too wound up about all the legalese. But it is important, and we did review it very carefully prior to that. Went through several rounds of review and revision before it was published yesterday morning.
So wouldn't the vendors have experience with municipal bid?
Somewhat,
Yeah.
yeah, and you need someone obviously who can post a bond and who's got all the required licenses and all of that. I guess what I've been envisioning is, there have to be vendors out there who are probably really good at installing sport courts, but may not have done a public construction project in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And may not, I mean, I can tell you in Maine, like, it wouldn't have looked like that. The spec might have looked exactly the same, but all that, trappings of the thing, there just wasn't that level of red tape.
Yeah.
So it's part of doing business in Massachusetts. So.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think I have let you know, we do have a request pending before the Concom on Monday night for an extension of the time of year restriction. We didn't want to submit that until we had the bid documents together, because we didn't want to, go through that process unless it became timely. So it is timely, and that will be taken up Monday night. And Park and Rec Commission also meets on Monday night, and I've been keeping them apprised, and have gotten very favorable feedback. They're happy to see the bid process is going forward. Let's see, Middle Street Bridge. I included in your packet public update that we posted earlier this week, just to let people know that it's not expected at this point to be totally complete until the first half of next year, which is well prior to the contractual deadline of November of next year. Back in May, it had seemed that there might be a scenario where the initial where it could be passable by the end of this calendar year. The project has run into significant subsurface peat, which is unsuitable and is not, load bearing for the walls and so forth. So I did meet on site Monday with Butch and with John Eric White and with our construction administration engineer, and there's a team meeting tomorrow. So nothing unexpected for a major project, but we just wanted to provide a public update as to how things are going. So
That's good. A lot of people have been asking about it because they were expecting it to be passable by the end of the year. So
yeah,
it's good then.
That had been said back in May. Obviously, that was prior to the unsuitable materials being found. Obviously, the project had gotten geotech analysis as part of the permitting, but that, as you know, is discrete. Areas they're doing core samples or borings, whatever. So that hadn't, the extent of the material has been far greater than what had shown up in the geotech. The H Pipes Dave Crosswalk, we're continuing to work with the contractor. They basically ran into a delay because of some items that needed to be custom fabricated that there's a delay getting those delivered. That includes the bases of the RRFBs as well as some of the electrical work. They've had some delays, so we're working with them. We've had some tough conversations, but we're keeping them on track. And I can tell you they are continue to be committed to doing a top quality job. It's taking longer than we had hoped. But we believe they're doing the best they can. And we do expect them back on site within the next 2 weeks. We're hopeful it will be next week, but I don't want to commit to that because it's out of our control. So, but that's just something we're in touch with them just about every day. And we're getting a lot of good support from our consultant TDC, and we're in touch with Master UT as well a couple of times a week on this. So I think my focus is, the end product, and I think it's going to be very, very good. So, I know it is. The MS4 annual report every year around this time, I share this with the board. It's due by September 30th of every year. It's something we do kind of in the background, but it does take some time. And it is newly updated every year. It's not just a kind of a cut and paste thing. So Christine Wallace was very helpful in pulling that together, and we had some support from MBTA as well. But a number of offices in town hall contribute to that. So that's always good to get that sent in and, keep us in compliance with that permit. Next item, we have a meeting coming up on Monday. This is going to cover a couple of topics with our stormwater working group. One is we have a contract in place with Horsley Witten Group to update the stormwater regs and the subdivision site plan regs for internal consistency with our stormwater bylaw, which, as you know, was amended at the Springtown meeting. So this has been part of, as I think I've been telling you guys for at least 5 years, the stormwater we've always known this is a multi-phase, takes years to get it fully integrated. So right now the stormwater bylaw is in great shape, but the regs need some updating, and the subdivision site plan regs haven't been updated in many years. And so the basic idea is to where those have their own standards on stormwater to cross-reference the bylaw and push everything back to the bylaw, so it's all consistent, rather than things that could be read as conflicting. The stormwater bylaw will govern, the stricter regulation is always going to govern, but in terms of clarity for applicants, we want to make sure that all of the town's bylaws and policies are internally consistent. So that's something that the town planner is really going to need to be the point person on, because those regulations are both under the authority of the planning board. So I've been working with him, and I know he's going to be working with the board to ensure that they keep some time on their work plan to really address that. And then the second item, and we'll have this on a future, probably on the next agenda, this culvert analysis that was done in June. That was also done by Horsley Witten Group. This was under the Ipswich River Watershed Association grant. We're going to review this also on Monday, because we got the report back in June. There were some corrections we sent. They turned around the corrections, so we have a report that reflects staff input, but it's never actually been presented to staff with a consultant present. So I think that's going to be really good. And also where we've got the new town planner, and we'll actually have a new conservation agent on the clock on Monday as well, so he'll be part of that. Looking ahead, the goal is to get all of this great new data on culverts into the town's GIS system, which is its own process that involves a fair amount of coordination and staff time. So that's something we continue to work on. Church and Prospect water main replacements, cost overage. This is a major focus, consuming a lot of time and energy. We are consulting with legal. We have gotten initial response, and we do have a couple of related Zoom meetings we'll put on the calendar for next week. So you can expect to hear about that in full detail a week from tonight, where that article is scheduled for review by both the board and the finance committee. I don't know if you want to.
Well, my question is, should this be an executive session issue? Because there's a lot going on there. I've got questions that pertain to litigation.
Yeah, I think anytime there's a potential for litigation, it's always appropriate to have executive session. So whether that's something that you wanted to do next Thursday, possibly prior to open session, or even if, you know, I don't know if this is proper, but if there was a motion to add that for tonight's, I mean, I'd be happy to speak frankly, but there are certain things that wouldn't be appropriate for open session at this stage.
I've got plenty of certain things that would be appropriate for.
It'll all become public as appropriate, but at this time where we're actively consulting with legal, that's something that until we have answers.
We don't have the full picture yet, there's a lot of parts missing that I see.
Correct.
So
Yeah,
I don't wanna say something and have somebody be offended by it, that create a bigger problem.
yep, fair. Let's see, the next item, I think you probably saw in the newspaper, there was a major meeting Monday night of this newly established ad hoc committee in Newburyport on water infrastructure prioritization. I attended that, and the group also met yesterday afternoon at City Hall. So I attended that meeting as well. And I'm very glad I did, because the items, well, Monday was an overview of the entire kind of capital priority, not the entire one, but the top 8 or 10 projects they're looking at. Yesterday's meeting was specifically focused on both the Indian Hill Pipeline and the Lower Artichoke Dam, both of which are located either fully or partially within West Newbury, so of great interest and concern to us. I think this establishment of this committee I see as a real opportunity for the town to engage with the broader Newburyport government, and because any intermunicipal agreement is going to rely on support on our side of both this board and the water commission. But for the city, it would involve both the city council and the mayor. May or may not involve the water and sewer commission. We don't know. That's not our question to answer. But what a couple of things that were said that were very, very notable on Monday night is the chair of the committee, Councilor Preston, said that she acknowledged right out of the gate that a lot of the things that they might need to do or will need to do will rely on an updated agreement with the town of West Newbury. So I think that's a big opportunity, because we've been saying that for many years. And this is the first time that there's public acknowledgement in the city that I'm aware of, that is going to be required for them to do some things that they're going to need to do. So I think there's an opportunity there. And the other thing that she said that I thought was very interesting was that they established this committee basically out of frustration on the part of the council that they were not getting the information they had been requesting of the from elsewhere in city government. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And the city council is not in the driver's seat on these issues. It really is the administration, but they are really rolling up their sleeves to get knowledgeable so they can at least take public positions, even though that is not what drives the city policy wise. They're the funding entity, and they would have to approve anything, but they are not the initiator of these projects. So it's pretty interesting dynamic. I know, Wendy, you listened in as well, so. But this is gonna be, their committee is gonna be very active the next at least six or 8 weeks, perhaps more, but they've got meetings every 2 weeks. So this is something that will be back before this board in the near term to basically revisit your priorities for a potential new intermunicipal agreement. And I met with Bob James earlier today, and I sent that request to him earlier this week, and we had a very productive meeting, and so he's going to have that on their next water commission meeting as well, for them to revisit discussions we've had a couple of years ago and either reaffirm the positions they've taken then or update those as needed. A couple of other brief updates. One is we've been working to update the capital program, which will be presented on or around November 1st under the town policies. So we've got a lot of department heads and you know, parts of the town government are working to update their respective projects, proposals. We had a extremely positive meeting earlier today with, Pentucket, Greg Haddon, Jonathan, and Bob Danforth, as well as myself, Brian, and Caitlin. Really good meeting. What we have done is we've got the kind of the Band-Aid list from the GNAP report. And we wanted to really get down to what do we need to be doing next year after that, so forth. A really good meeting. You'll see all of that when we, propose the capital program in about a month. But it was a really, I will say Greg has such an incredible understanding of that building. He is a phenomenal resource, and he's been very generous with his time. He read the GNAP report multiple times. He was able to, and he said every single project on their list is a worthwhile project. But some of them, the non-Band-Aid ones, he completely affirmed those are not things we need to be looking at until an MSBA process plays out. So he felt the Band-Aid list was the appropriate list. But he did say a number of the things in here are really not things that he thinks we need to be focused on, whereas there's a few that he thinks we do. And so that was very informative to us as we work to update those the paid school capital program for next year and really for the next 5 years. And then finally, starting in about a week, you'll start to see new friendly faces when you enter the town office building. This has been a plan that's been in the works for actually a number of years, and it's coming to fruition with a welcome station down in the lobby. Christine Marshall has put together an entire program for senior tax workout volunteer or workers to essentially be greeters. And we have there's a whole framework that they'll, have all the key information on hours of operation, who's in that day, who's out that day, who's, out, who's tied up at that time. So people can walk around the building, go wherever they want, but I know people sometimes get frustrated. They walk up to the top flight only to find out that person's out in the field or at a training. And so they're going to have the calendars and be able to really give, I think, a very high level of customer service. And
their business cards down there, so get upstairs.
Yeah, and the phone system, really take advantage of that to be able to kind of route people most efficiently. And she put together an entire binder of it's a thing of beauty, honestly. It's a phenomenal amount of work, and it's been a team effort. Rebecca has been really involved and helpful with that, but Christine has shouldered a lot of that, and I think it's going to be really positive.
So will there be coverage all hours when the office building's open? Or?
No, I think it's primarily like the morning. I'd have to check that. I don't think it's 8 to 4:30. I think it's more like 8 to 12. But it could always be expanded. This will be the first time we're doing it, but
Great.
I think there's a great foundation there.
Didn't Christine say that while they were sitting there, they didn't have tons of stuff to do, that other offices could bring filing and organizing and tasks?
Yeah, stuffing envelopes,
Yeah.
For instance, we'll be sending letters out early next week for the town center meeting on October 22nd. So we'll have extra sets of hands to just help with some of that work, which we always need help.
Right, that's great. So did you want to make an announcement about the conservation agent? I mean, you kind of did already.
Well, I don't want to put a name out there because I haven't notified the commission. I've notified the chair. But I have something drafted. I just haven't had time to get sent. We've been, but yeah, we did interview a couple of finalists, very positive. We had 2 really strong candidates, and we did extend an offer. I did extend an offer, and person has accepted the offer. So after tonight's meeting, I'll finish up that email and I'll send it out to you. And at that point, we'll announce the person's name and qualifications. But very impressive person.
Good. Moving on to action items. A is a request for appointment of full-time police officer, Sean Santiago.
Thank you. So Sean comes to us from Methuen. We were walking over here from the police station earlier and he was talking to me about being from Methuen and now wanting to work in a small town. And we were talking about the differences in government and how this is much, different than how a city operates.
Mhm.
So when we got here, he was looking through the agenda and it's just like, wow, lots of things happen here. And I said, they certainly do. But he worked for the Methuen Police Department. And he found that he really wanted to work for a smaller community, not just a big, busy department, which is a little bit opposite to what we have commonly dealt with from a retention standpoint, which is people work in West Newbury and then they want to go to where there's a lot more action. When I sat down to have a meeting with him, I asked him why West Newbury. He said, well, that was the first town I picked. And when I asked him, did you think about applying to any other departments? And he said, no, I wanna work for you.
Awesome.
So it was a great meeting. He's full-time police academy trained. So we really will be able to hit the ground running with Sean once we get all the paperwork finalized. So recommending him for the full-time position.
Starting when?
Really as soon as we can. Obviously, we're gonna have to get some paperwork done. I know that's
Yeah.
gonna take a little bit of time. It's Thursday. There's a lot of work going on tomorrow, so
Okay.
I'm sure we can make it work. But we'll start, if he's appointed, having him come in tomorrow and do some paperwork with the treasurer's office, if that's appropriate.
Any questions?
I laughed at Mike's letter because he had the academy in there and the background check, because he knows I always ask those questions. So,
Happy
I
to
highlighted and I laughed at, I said,
Yeah.
thank you,
I
Mike.
changed it around a little bit this time,
No,
just to, make it,
Okay.
see if you were paying attention.
I was. I'll make a motion to appoint Sean Santiago as a full-time police officer.
Second.
And so this is for until June 30th, correct?
Also next year, isn't it?
You know what?
They're indefinite.
There was actually a clarification on this recently. Why don't we say that for now, but I actually don't, I think, I don't wanna, it was something to do with the collective bargaining agreement. The term of the collective bargaining agreement, but there, Tim.
We talked about that a couple of meetings ago.
Yeah, cause we'd gotten an opinion a couple of years ago, and it's always been through June 30th. But then, there was a clarification, it's just,
The
I don't-
union contract supersedes that and should.
correct, yeah, so I think that it's, so let me send that around. I think for tonight, just.
Well, there's no term in the motion, so that should be fine, right?
Yeah.
So
And
Sean,
then,
this is
yeah, I'll
nothing
send
to
it
do
around.
with you.
Yeah, we just talked about
Okay.
that a little bit, yeah, it's more of a formality type
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah. But we have been annually reappointing, the police, officers, so, all right. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Thank you and welcome.
Great.
Thank you. Did you have any, do you wanna introduce yourself? You have the floor, I mean, I'm not the sheriff.
Sean, as you guys know, working with them for about 5 months or so, decided that town would be a much better fit for a town. So I'm just honored to be able to work here and, grow and be thankful that, I'm working for a town that has rich in culture and with a good tight knit community like you guys, I just feel like I'll fit right in.
Great.
That's terrific, yeah, it is not a sleepy little town. Hopefully from a law
Night shift.
enforcement, I know.
Night shift can be a little tough.
But yeah, there's a lot that goes on, and, I was told,
She's gonna scare him off. Just-
no details too small, yes.
Yeah, it certainly comes from a lot of experience in a short period of time working for the city, so.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Not sure, hey. Alright, welcome aboard, so, yeah, that totally, we'll just reach out to Caitlin, she can start the pre-employment.
And we'll get them sworn in and all that stuff.
Great, yeah, great, thank you. We are a little short staffed tomorrow, Amanda's gonna be pretty much holding down the fort, Max is out and Rebecca's out tomorrow, so, she can get her sworn in and Caitlin's in, perfect.
All right, item B is request for appointment of a reserve police officer, Matthew Pinsky, who I understand is working. tonight.
Yeah, he was unable to get coverage to
Okay.
come here tonight, but he does have experience working as a reserve officer. He's worked for the town in the past, the animal control department. I know him quite well. And when I met with the Beverly chief during the week, he spoke very highly of that and the working relationship that he has with him in Beverly as the animal control. So we're looking forward to giving him that opportunity to work as a reserve with us with potential opportunities down the road.
So about how many hours a week? I mean,
So I told him right off the bat, he needs to work, he's gonna need to do, you know, we talk about right now the 4 shifts per month,
Okay.
which is appropriate.
Yeah,
So, yeah, he's gonna be expected to do that. I'll monitor his hours and then, if there's any issues, I'll report it out.
any questions, Ross? Yes.
Is this getting pretty close to fully staffed?
So this will bring us up to, where we are for full staffing. We still have one in the academy that's gonna need to be field trained. Sean will obviously need to be field trained as well, but we're not gonna be waiting for the academy, which really is almost a year's time. So he's gonna be uniformed up and then all the required training he's gonna go through. And there's some trainings that we may be able to waive because he's already done it. And if that's the case, that's what we'll do.
So I'll make a motion to appoint Matthew Lipinski as a part-time police officer.
Second. And I believe for this one, it would be appropriate to have a fiscal year.
June 30th of 26.
No, all in favor? Aye. Great. Item C is a request for authorization to apply for a 911 grant. This is the same grant you apply for every year, correct?
Yeah, we really use this to offset some of the costs that normally our budget will cover. This one in particular, this year, I actually want to use it to upgrade the annual training that all the dispatchers need to do. The system we're using right now is inexpensive, and with that, the training is not that great. This grant is gonna be used, certainly work with Angus and finance department to go over what we're gonna use it for, but it should cover the costs for training hours, new dispatcher certifications, training, and then their annual in-service training.
So I'm not seeing a dollar amount. that is missing.
0.00. That's.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, so working on this right now because what I don't want to do in the past, we have sort of gone all in on it and then we've had trouble using it all up. And I just don't want to waste that amount of time and I want to make sure that we have an accurate number before we go forward with the grant.
So should we wait until you have a number before approving it, or?
So just to remind the board, the kind of intent of the policy isn't to review the complete grant application. It's really to authorize the filing of the application. So if the board wants more detail to do that, you could certainly wait on it. But even there, obviously, and the board has total discretion to handle it how you want, and there have been grants where you've wanted to see the complete application, that's your prerogative. But the real intent of the policy, when the board adopted it and amended it a number of years ago, was to make sure that before the town is entering a contractual agreement for a grant, that everything's known in terms of any matching funds or any matching resources in terms of staff time, and that there's some centralized oversight of that. So commitments aren't made that you find out about later. So if you want that detail, you certainly could table it.
I'm not
Yeah.
looking for the application, I just wanted to know the dollar amount.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now for the in-service training, it's about $4,000. And that's up from almost $1,000 before. And the additional cost would be for the annual certifications that we've done in the past through this grant, so.
So in your budget, did you assume you were gonna receive the grant, or did you budget it for the cost for this training?
So in the past, we have assumed we're gonna get the grant, but recently there was concerns about whether or not the grant would be offered again. Due to, changes with local, with state and federal government funding. Same with the subordinate incentive grant, there's a chunk of money, about $15,000. That's used to offset the cost of our CAD subscriptions each year for our dispatch console. That is not in the budget, we've always assumed we can get it. I'm really gonna look at this year's budget and try to see if that's worth doing again. Cause there's a little bit of a delay when you can pay for the July 1st bill, when the grant doesn't really get approved until a few months later.
One thing I can offer, as you know, earlier today, I updated the memo to the planning board on the MBTA grants. And I'm just looking at that spreadsheet and that, and I'm seeing the E911 or the 911 training grant. The last several years, it looks like the amounts have been anywhere from just over $1,000 to the high was like $4,400. So it's a pretty small dollar grant.
Grant. The motion to have the chief authorize the chief to apply for the 911 grant.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you.
I'll introduce yourself, you'll have it. So when she's the chair.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
This one's the top. Ross.
This meeting.
We always do that, how is it?
Yeah, so
All right, item D is request for appointment to the agricultural committee. So one of the candidates we selected decided not work commitments, which is too much, and she couldn't participate. So Rebecca reached out to all of the candidates that had applied that were not selected. And so we have all of those applications here. The only people that were still interested were John Adams and Ann Seller.
Let me talk about last.
But did Rebecca hear from her?
You just texted me and said she has not heard back, so.
So it would be Ann or John Adams. Any comments?
Who is it that withdrew? Where is it?
Catherine, Marone, Bob.
Or from the committee and who it.
Kennedy.
Oh, okay.
Want to make a motion? I would make a motion to nominate John Adams to the bank committee. Second.
Discussion?
The farmers. No, last time he was here, and it got a little squishy because it said John and Cindy on the thing, and he said, well, Cindy'd be better than me, and so I'm glad that there's one choice. That makes it almost something on there. I think it'd be a good addition to the committee.
Did you second? Sorry.
I did, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right.
And thank you to Ann, keep plugging away.
Yep. Right, item E is a request to approve additional language to the housing production plan and resubmit to the HLC.
This is why I don't cross things off my list until
There.
truly done, because this has felt like it's been done for
So,
a long time.
so the process, I mean, are we gonna have to resubmit it again, or can you just send the one page and tell them? I mean, you've been in communication with them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this same item is before the planning board on Tuesday night. And yeah, if this board and that board both agree, then we would simply update that one page
Okay.
to the state.
So just for anybody listening, the change was removing the Break Hill property from the housing production plan, given that it was not selected as an MBTA location. And there's some language kind of, strengthening the town's intent to, pursue, housing production on the two properties that are listed. One is 187 Main Street, the Knapp property, and the other is the Mullen property.
How does the town have any latitude over the Knapp property?
Well, the town doesn't own it, obviously, but there's a, do you wanna, put the statement up there that?
I have a statement.
Yeah. I'm just summarizing what the statement is for, it's. You see it there? So.
Well, I meant the statement that you put into the housing production plan, that's what I'm referencing.
Well, this is the
That's the
language that
thing.
they've asked.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking at.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
But you really can't force a whole lot of pressure on. the
I'm not, but we can encourage comprehensive permit, you know, that's a 40B.
If they go that way.
Yeah,
Okay, and I think that's squishy, but, Ray Kill's out of there, I'm happy.
Ross, any concerns?
You know, I mean, we didn't go along with the friend with 40B, so.
I mean, it's not to say we couldn't in the future, the reason that we weren't supportive of it was there were no details, no clear benefit for the town.
Right.
But they could still do a non.
Good.
I know you wanna make the motion, Chris, so.
We previously approved it, but I mean, the last meeting with the.
You did, but at that time, I had been specific about the Break Hill removal. It was more recent that we got this correspondence from the state asking for this additional language, so that had not been part of what you'd taken up last time.
Make a motion to approve the revised housing production plan. Revision being removing Break Hill property and having the wording specific to 187 Main Street and the mall property.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So how many times have we voted on this?
This has got to be the fourth.
Okay,
Last,
hopefully it isn't last. Okay, next item is a request for addition of Mill Pond Training projects to the town list planning. And we have nobody from Mill Pond. How do you wanna handle this? Yeah, I really feel like this needs a discussion, because some of these are not, in alignment with what's in the plan already.
Yeah, I'm not sure, I know Rebecca is typically in touch with people in terms of what time things may come up. Obviously, we're ahead of where we often are on the agenda, so maybe they'll zoom in later. I'm not sure if she gave them a time or not.
There's no time. agenda.
Yeah, she made notes about certain people that were coming, but there wasn't.
Nothing, okay.
Well, let's pass over it for now, and if somebody shows up, we can keep it back.
Yeah, I can always be taken up at a future meeting.
Or at this meeting if somebody comes?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. All right, moving on to select board minutes. Favorite part of the meeting?
I made the revisions for the ones I had, I gave to Max, and I hadn't looked, I assumed
Okay,
that he incorporated them, so. I don't know, you have.
Just out of curiosity, when did, just because he's been out for about a week and a half, so when did you go through that?
This was a couple of meetings ago, remember, I
Okay,
read the line
okay,
because they
right.
had been reviewed.
Got it, okay, I just want to make sure that.
The current set I sent. That I sent to him, real, he's out on Monday. And
Yeah, he'll be back.
came back, so that's not even here.
Okay,
all right, under item B, the last sentence, I prefer it to say this concept has previously not been supported, rather than badly received.
which, I'm sorry, which date and which item?
So we're starting with August 21st.
Yep,
Item B, last sentence.
B, got it.
Just replace badly received with not been supported.
I'm sorry, I'm missing that one.
Uh,
Yeah, okay. Which number?
B, it says,
Oh, I thought it said DB.
oh, sorry, B.
Got it, all right.
On item G, this is a question, is the invasives contractor going to develop an invasive management plan as part of the scope that we're looking at? I thought that was kind of future.
It's something we have built in, obviously, until there's funding, you know, there's no contract, but in the scope, the idea is they're gonna be part of a working group to actually come up with like per property, you know, plans.
Okay,
So
so that is correct.
how far that goes is gonna be a function of budget and bandwidth, but we did put in, whereas the prior contract was really largely the treatment. This contract, or this scope, we were explicit in putting in more like zooming into meetings, coming to meetings. To actually help learn from their knowledge on how they would advise management.
Okay. And then on item I, could you just scan that over, I guess, to make sure that the language is okay?
Yeah, this isn't quite right, because the assurance was not from the contractor, it was from, yeah.
Well, I think it needs to be clarified. I
Yeah.
just wanna make sure we don't say anything that's not 100% accurate here.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, basically, you know, we relied on advice from the engineer, the town's engineer.
So is that enough of a change to replace?
I might, I mean, you know, obviously wanna re-listen to exactly what was said and make sure it's consistent with that, but I think it's a nuanced issue, and I think it's worth making sure that, I mean, it's pretty good, that, like, but it could probably, I'm sure what was stated was more specific, so.
So do you wanna take a look at it, or?
Yeah, I think it's worth
I'm
taking.
fine approving it with Angus's language, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, I can, once we change it, or I can send it around and you guys take a look, but,
I'm fine with whatever.
yeah.
On the next page, on item F, this is about the water quality testing in Mill Pond. Instead of open the town to liability, I would say that this would set a precedent to test on a regular basis. Yeah. Can I keep going, you guys?
Sorry, Ed, no, my sense.
Okay, under item H, the paragraph before Article 1. The last sentence, I would just say agreed to hold joint meetings instead of agreed to do joint meetings. It's a minor thing. Article 5 on that same page. The contractor, it's not to assist with plans for the renovation, right? It's to assist with the MSBA statement of interest.
Yes,
Okay, so I'll just replace that. Next page, Article 12. Amanda, I guess this is a question for you. This is on the special events bylaw. Is the bylaw is not giving the select board power to manage the policy, is it? Isn't it just setting fees and,
Just setting fees.
yeah. Sure.
enforce,
Maybe he means, you know, we have the bylaw,
Mhm.
and then there was the document that was like the policies regarding bathrooms or all the different things that don't need to be in the bylaw.
Mhm.
Police officers, that you guys have discretion to edit and change however you want the fees, but bylaw. That stuff you can't change. Maybe he means that other document.
Okay.
I can check with him.
I think enforce is also, you know, I think the bylaws helpful in terms of.
Oh, it's just the way he described what Article 12 is.
Yeah.
And gives select board. I have to think about how
Okay.
word that. Audit. Not policy, it would be. A bylaw to enforce. Special permitting and giving the select board. Power to. Set these and. Possibly. Can we think about that?
Sure, okay. See, now the last sentence before section I. Should say conduct a facilities master plan rather than a feasibility study, not before a feasibility study. And initiated is spelling correctly.
But that would be struck anyway, right?
I mean, it could say, yeah, yes, you're right, yeah.
We'll correct the spelling, then we'll delete it.
Perfect. That's all I'm fine. Under general discussion, item D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences down, instead of saying trouble areas in quotes, I would say. The 3 high risk areas, something like that. These were the sites identified in 2024 report. I don't think they called them trouble areas, but.
I know when the grant are referred to as focus areas, I don't know if you wanna say that or if you wanna.
They were called out in the executive summary of the 2024 report, but I just don't have the language, but if it just says high risk areas, I think that's fine.
Okay.
And that's it for me.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of August 21st as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So the August 28th, I feel like we already did these. Is that just because we did them with the working group? Or I wonder if the working group changes were incorporated into these. This is the joint meeting we had.
I don't think we had approved them previously.
Okay. All right, I would just, halfway down, resident, should be Patricia Reeser instead of Patty.
That's not friendly at all.
She does not like that. And then I have a question on item E, Angus. This is the review of warrant articles. It refers to the Break Hill Terrace article as being outstanding, and I don't think that was on the docket for this.
No, it never was.
Okay, so that, just strike that whole sentence. Right,
Make a motion to accept the minutes of August 28th as amended.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Moving on to general discussion items. Item A is Whittier School Building Composition and other items. What do you want to say about that, Angus?
Lot to say.
Yeah,
So, there was a meeting on Monday, it was, all, called fairly hastily, I think this working group that Chris and I have been going to the meetings every month for, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, give or take, is, at a stage where it's going to need to be formalized as, an official public body with leadership structure, namely chair, vice chair, clerk. Basically, the chair obviously would be responsible for setting the agenda, posting the agenda. Clerk would be responsible for, ensuring minutes are kept and so forth. So, there's very active, dialogue right now among the, regional cities and towns with the, school administrations, representative. The school board was there as well on Monday as to how is that process gonna happen, because I guess I skipped over the building composite. I'll circle back to that in a minute. But the school committee did meet on September, I want to say it was September 11th to they made their appointments for the school building committee. And that did generate some concern among some of the member communities, specifically not necessarily limited to, but Rowley and Salisbury. And because the reason I started by saying this group doesn't really have a clear structure in terms of leadership is because it doesn't have those things like a chair, it becomes, well, who can call a meeting? And basically anyone could call a meeting, so. One of the select board members in one of the other towns basically sent an email to the whole group saying, we need to meet and we can't wait till October 8th, which is our next regularly scheduled meeting, so. A number of us responded and said, if there's a meeting, we'll be there. So there was a meeting on Monday and I was there. I think it dialed down the temperature. The school committee chair, Scott Wood, was there. I think he spoke very well. Some of the concerns that, I think the Salisbury board member had raised, that I know are shared by at least Rowley, were the number of members of the school building committee that are residents of Haverhill. The point was made that some of the required members of the school building committee are certain people who are part of the school administration or school facilities who also happen to live in the town. So that's, so I think the discussion helped it. It was odd to me, kind of
How many towns were represented? Do you have any?
I don't know. There were about 25 people at the meeting, which is a little bit less than our normal number, but it was most people, it seemed, but I didn't take like a head count of like which cities and towns were represented. And I didn't specifically notice any that weren't. But basically, we've got our next regularly scheduled meeting next Wednesday, and that there's going to be some really interesting discussion there to do with the regional agreement working group, regional agreement advisory committee. Basically, it needs to be figured out, what is this body? Under what authority is it established? Is it appointed by the school board? Is it a locally established committee that is a creature of the cities and towns? And what role will it play? Is it advisory? It's clearly not deciding anything. Ultimately, the only parties that can decide any amendments to the regional agreement are the town meetings and the city councils, the legislative process, and it has to be, as we know, an 11-0 unanimous vote. So no changes can be made without all of that. But the process of how to get there is really right on the front burner.
Doesn't seem to be something the school committee can do on its own.
No,
It's not.
but under how the regional agreement was written in the 60s, it does provide a greater role for the Whittier Tech School Committee relative to the regional agreement than our Pentucket regional agreement has for the Pentucket School Committee, which really has nothing to do with the regional agreement. That's not to say they're not interested in it or that they're not part of the conversation, but they do not have a role in approving it. The Pentucket regional agreement is approved solely by the 3 towns through town meeting and by the state through DESI. The Whittier Tech agreement, the school board does have a role, so that's different. So basically, I think that's something that I wanted to discuss tonight. The school board, when they met on September 11th, had sketched out not specific appointments to this regional agreement, we'll call it advisory group, but did talk about what they envisioned as the composition of that group, which they had envisioned 1 designee from each of the cities and towns, plus 4 members of the school committee for a total membership of 15. At the meeting that we had on Monday, the suggestion was made, and I think everybody agreed that if that does end up being how it is or something similar to how it is, that each city and town should have a designated primary and backup. So similar to the seat that we hold on the MIVA board, where we have a primary designee, but if that person's not there, we still have a seat at the table, we still have a vote. Personally, I think that approach makes sense. I think if, let's say you got to 2 people from each city and town, plus members of the school board, all of a sudden you have a public body of, potentially 26 or more people. I think there is an element of logistics that ought to be considered here. And I made the point a number of times at the meeting on Monday that while these large group meetings that Chris and I go to are interesting and definitely have been helpful and definitely have been advanced the dialogue, that is not where the work is gonna get done. The work's gonna get done by smaller groups, sitting around a conference table, rolling up their sleeves with red pens and markups and documents, and that's what needs to happen. So if, so I've, made the point in a couple of correspondences that, we need to get this thing organized so it can start getting subcommittees or sub-working groups that can start really digging into the details and different aspects of the regional agreement, whether that's method of amendment, whether that's allocation of capital funding, whether that's, the host of other issues. There's an enormous amount of content there, and there's gonna need to be subcommittees, because otherwise there's just no way this is gonna get done on the timeline it's gonna need to get done. So
We go back to the timeline, it's tied into the state.
it is,
Program, it's a short schedule
that's right.
already, what is the,
So the agreement has to be revised as part of the feasibility. By the end of the feasibility. Timeline within the MSBA process. So. Let's see, I'm looking at my notes from the meeting. I don't have that date clear in my head, it's in the letter though.
I don't remember it either, I just.
Yeah.
It's stunningly quick, I think, for the work that's supposed to happen.
Yes.
So, the 4 members of the school committee are to be determined, or?
Yeah, no one's been appointed. And it's very much an open question. Yeah, okay, here's the note I was looking for. So Maureen Lynch had said, we need the regional agreement revisions before we can go to schematic design. So there is gonna come a point where they can't go further in the MSBA process without getting the regional agreement complete. So, yeah, that's an absolute critical path item. Yeah, so the school committee didn't make any appointments, so this whole question of who, under what authority does this exist? Is this appointed by the school board or not? So the superintendent's got a meeting with her legal counsel tomorrow. She sent out earlier today, and Chris was copied. A list of 8 or 9 questions she had. I chipped in my advice on that, and I'm sure others will as well. But I think, and I think I copied you both on that, or I copied you both. But I think that sets out a lot of the questions that are really gonna need to be resolved as soon as possible. In terms of the, the path to get to amendments that can be then formally considered. And I say amendments, but really what we're talking about is a whole new agreement.
I don't see how it's gonna happen, especially the way this is all starting off,
Well, I spoke with, when I saw the email come in from, from Salisbury, I reached out to superintendent by phone and, there was some follow-up that had not happened from the prior meeting, and I let her know that was an issue, and within an hour, she sent out an email to the whole group with a lot of follow-up information, which was, better late than never. But I also connected by phone with Phil Collegero, and the way, he described it as basically, in his words, he said every time someone sneezes, he gets 15 calls from cities and towns, and we're not gonna get anything done with that kind of dynamic. So there's got to be some mutual trust, there's got to be working relationships, and I think there is a strong foundation for that with this group that Chris and I have been part of. But it's still this amorphous group. There's not a roster, it's kind of whoever shows up from those cities and towns. There's no voting process. There's certainly no leadership structure in terms of chairs. I mean, the way this will go once it really gets on its legs is, on its feet is, if there's information that needs to be shared with the group, that can be shared with the chair, who can then further share it and let that correspondence happen like every other public body. Rather than, Northern Essex, they've got other jobs. This is not their only thing. And they just, they can't really function running a college if they're getting 15 phone calls every time, someone writes a letter to the editor, which is really what set the whole thing off. So I also became aware at the meeting that there was similar correspondence sent to the MSBA, which is of significant concern because that's sent by a member of the school committee, but not on behalf of the school committee. So there's some damage control that's going on, and there's some real concern as to, splintering that seems to be happening very early in the process.
All right. Did you go, Chris?
I was going to the last minute crisis on putting me.
All right.
So I just do want to finish with the follow-up. I think it's gonna need to be, future meeting for board action, but I think at some point in the not too distant future, you will be named, you have to name a member and a backup. I would not suggest taking action on that tonight. We need to wait and see how things shake out and who the composition is and under what authority is operating, and is it advisory to the school board? Is it advisory to its respective cities and towns? That stuff all needs to be figured out, and I know the district is working with their legal counsel to at least try to get some clarity on this, and I think next Wednesday's meeting is gonna be quite important.
I assume they'll be looking for an appointment quickly,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
All right. Item B is a request to include analysis of contribution towards retired town employee medical insurance on the FY26 work plan. So there is an item on there, but it's not specifically this, right?
Yeah, correct. Well, it's so we had within, as you know, the work plan had a section on, baseline, a section on future, and also a section on completed projects. And as you know, one of the completed programs or projects for the prior fiscal year was the contract actuarial study of cost impacts if the town changed the percentage split for employee and retiree health insurance. So that was completed last year. As you know, the board supported my request to put ARPA funds. We engaged our OPEB actuary. They issued a report early this calendar year. It was shared with the board. I think it was probably around February. At that time, obviously, there was a lot of focus on budget and town meeting, and what went on to become the single busiest town meeting warrant I think this town has ever seen, for the number of warrant articles last spring. Not just the number, but the range and type. So the report was shared. It didn't get a whole lot of discussion other than an acknowledgement that it's great to have the report, but to really dig into that issue from a policy standpoint is a separate project. So that's essentially where it stands.
So could you kind of just give a high level view of what would be involved to, other projects,
Yeah, I mean, I can take a crack at it, but the key staff would really be the treasurer and the town accountant. Because they're both much more hands-on with benefits administration and but we have from the actuary what the estimated cost impact would be if so right now, just to kind of set the kind of basic facts. So the town right now pays 65% of employee health insurance, with the employee paying 35%. Once people retire, that goes down to 50%. Town pays 50%, retiree pays 50%. Under state law, 50% is the minimum that a city or town is required to pay. So if the town was to, so we can engage the actuary to look at what would be the financial exposure or financial impact if the town went to 55%, 60%, 65%. That's just different tiers. And the report provided those numbers. They were looking over the life cycle of the town, so there's some pretty big numbers in there, but you're also looking at basically your census of current employees. And an actuary basically putting that through their filter of when might those people retire, how long might they live, you know, there's a lot of might, should, or, you know. There's a lot of assumptions that, you know, that's what they do, so. So that provided some numbers, I think. Looking at that more like, how would that affect them, you know, each year or the next 5 years, what would be the process for the, or, you know, for the town to make a change if it was inclined to do that. I believe that would involve both a policy decision of the select board, but also an appropriation through the budget process to fund that, so.
Okay.
What's the philosophy? That's kind of strange when you gave those numbers. Employees are 65% paid by the town. You're requiring employees to pay more when they retire.
Yeah,
What's the philosophy on that? What's the
Is
thought
that the
process?
assumption that Medicaid covers it, or?
the rates are definitely lower. I don't wanna, I'm not trivializing that, but the rates are objectively lower for a retiree plan than an employee plan. Whether that informs that decision or not, I don't know. That's been in place since long before I got here. I also don't know that was an affirmative decision that was made by some prior board, or whether it simply defaults to 50 because that's the state requirement. So that might have been something, some former, you know, treasurer collector, that's the state minimum, so that's what they would do. Whether that was even brought forward and, you know, for board discussion prior to my time, I don't know. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't.
I just like what's the thought process behind it. I mean, you basically retire, we're gonna stick it to you by 15%.
That's certainly one way to look at
That
it.
doesn't seem too good.
So I assume you are all here for that. Do you have somebody, a spokesperson, or let me first say that what we're talking about is the town has a work plan of projects that the select board has approved to be on there. We're trying to kind of get a handle on all this work that's being thrown at the town. So when we consider a project, which getting to a decision on this will be a project, these that I just outlined. We want to know what the impact on staff time will be, who on staff will be doing it. And so, and then whether it will be immediately in the next 6 months, or near term, the next 12 months, or longer term. So those are kinds of things we want to decide. But if you have a spokesperson or any of you want to make comments about why you think this change should be made, we're happy to listen to that. I'm assuming it would be.
We don't really have a
You've reached out to me.
spokesperson. We don't really have a spokesperson, but I did reach out to you, and Lisa Holmes, I'm sorry, retired from the police department. And I gathered up a few retirees, and then once I saw what was written on there, I stopped calling people, because I said, well, you know, nothing's probably gonna reach, you know, any type of decision. I was fortunate to meet with the town manager and discuss this briefly with him. And Mr. Wild, thank you. That's our sentiment exactly. Once you retire, you go back to paying 50%. I mean, originally I paid 50%, as did some of my co-workers and what have you. And then upon retirement, the town was paying 65%. And then when we all retired, we're back to 50%. And some people have Medicare, some people don't. I pay my own, so it's $912 a month for me, for between Medicare and MedX. Thank you for getting old. And so we're just looking to see is there something we can do as a group to maybe help expedite this? You know, just looking for the board's input as to what we can do to help us and future retirees. When it's your turn, you know, we're just looking to do what we can to expedite it. So I understand, you know, it's not gonna happen next week, next month, you know, in the next few months, but
But you're raising the issue, which.
yeah, we need it, yeah, it, you know, we're just, we're just looking to do what we can to expedite it, so I understand, you know, it's not gonna happen next week, next month, you know, in the next few months, but.
But you're raising the issue, which.
Yeah,
Okay.
And the advice I gave to Lisa, and I really thank her for reaching out, it was to advocate for yourselves, because
Yeah.
this board, as you know very well,
Yeah,
they get
we
a
know.
ton of information. So I think, you know, I hadn't known you were gonna have it, because it's not a decision point tonight.
Exactly.
But I think
yes,
it's great
yeah.
that everyone's here, because this is how the process works, but I definitely, you know, I said, like, you know, the report was done, the report was provided. But in terms of like what the next steps are, it's really a matter of how the board prioritizes that. And so I think it's great that you're. advocating for
Yeah,
yourself.
but I think a lot of us are retired, we do have time that we, you know, can put into this. I know Larry asked me if we needed to do a petition, or if there's something that you think we need to do as a group. If, you know, you have my information, if you wanna reach out to me, I'll get in touch with people and we'll do whatever needs to be done, but, is there? I mean, I know you're coming up with the fall town meeting pretty soon, but is there any timeline that you're gonna be
Well, that's
thinking about this?
That's what we're talking about tonight.
Okay.
So typically, something would be on as a discussion item, and we wouldn't vote on it until it was an action item.
Right.
But I think what we need to do is figure out what is required to get us to the point where we're ready to make a vote. You know, if we decide that this is an immediate term thing, then potentially we could have something on the spring town meeting, because it wouldn't have a budget impact, so the town would have to vote
Correct.
on it.
Yeah.
So seems like that would be a spring town meeting, either the next one or the one after. Does that seem reasonable?
It does, and it's something that, you know, I can definitely talk with Jenny and Caitlin. Obviously, they're familiar with the report that we all collectively felt it was appropriate to initiate, because it's something that at a staff level, we've wondered about. And I hadn't been aware of whether it had been kind of affirmatively discussed by this, or I knew it was, but like by a prior board, or if it had just kind of happened that way. So I thought, knowing this board, knowing our finance committee, having the data was always gonna be the first step. So that was what we did. That was a good thing to get done, as to at least have an informed discussion. But I can talk to Jenny and Caitlin as to what type of work would they need to do, as opposed to it could be something like asking the actuary to do some follow-up work. We don't really have a budget for that, but if it's a couple of hours, it might be something we could absorb. So I can talk to them and report back at a future meeting as to what would be the path to basically provide this board and the other interested parties, which most immediately would be the finance committee and town meeting voters, the information you and they would need to make an informed decision.
Okay. Would it be appropriate for somebody from this group to make a report at town meeting, or is that only established boards and committees?
Are you saying for like this fall?
Just,
I think it's all, I think, you know, dialogue at town meeting is always a good thing. I think one thing we have not had for a number of years is an insurance advisory working group at the staff level. We have kind of an informal, but it's not been formal, and for a number of years. And that's something we'd like to get going. Me and Caitlin and Jenny talk about it a couple of times a year, but we just, you know, it's a bandwidth issue. That's something that typically would include at least one retiree on a insurance advisory committee. So that's something that could be, you know, reestablished, and that could be like an organized body that could really chew on this. But it's difficult for me, you know, I don't want to commit to that now. I haven't talked to them, and I know they have bandwidth issues, and so. But I think it would be really good if it's something that the select board does end up setting as either immediate or near-term priority, namely sometime this fiscal year. I think it would be very appropriate to notify the voters at the fall town meeting that they could expect that this might be something that would be considered at spring town meeting. I don't believe it would be something the town meeting would be voting on as an article. It would simply be embedded in the operating budget.
okay. So it seems like, I think it would be good to know why it's at 50%. Maybe that's anecdotal, but it would just be interesting to me.
Yeah, I don't know if, I mean, I don't wanna pick on Gary, but, you know, I think you pay a lot of attention to 20+ years you were here. Do you have any insight, like, did the former board make that decision? Did it just kind of default to 50?
I think that was at the 50% was back when everybody only got 50%.
Back at the employee level, it's only.
Right.
Okay,
Employee level.
yeah,
Somehow,
all right.
Retirees got left behind. For years, we would always come in and ask. We were asking for 75% insurance at one point. The answer was always, well, if we give it to you guys, we'll have to give it to the school, and now the school has it. and we don't have it.
We don't.
So,
Never, yeah, never will.
the school ended up getting it, and we ended up getting nothing for years, and then went to the 65, whatever it is they pay now.
Yeah.
And for some reason, the retirees get left behind on that.
It would be
I
interesting.
know like Groveland pays 75% of the premium for retirees, whatever the town, that's what they pay.
Same amount.
So I can't see why it could be almost like a housekeeping thing, and we change all the percentages to the same for all employees, so we kind of get left behind when they did, and give a number what it will cost next year to
Yeah.
pay for it,
Right.
not 20 years, then nobody.
Yeah, we don't,
for
yeah.
that.
That's how actuaries think, so.
Yeah, but we would only be voting on that year's budget, so.
Yeah, right.
That should be part of it. All right, so any other information we want?
There's one more just piece of kind of a factoid is and Gary can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the increase, I think it only went to 65%. Hey, Garrett,
Gary, he's talking.
Garrett,
Yeah.
I think it only went to 65% from 60, probably about in the year or so before I started in 2018.
Yeah,
Does that sound about right?
right, yeah, it wasn't very long ago.
So, yeah, so it kind of, I don't know if it went from 50 to 60
Yeah.
longer ago, and then from 60 to 65. So basically, it's increased twice over the.
Yeah.
And that, so that was, I mean, I started 2018, and so it was probably somewhere around 2017 or so.
Right.
That it went to 65%.
Mhm.
I don't believe it's been put on the table as like a, policy discussion since that time. At a staff level, we have these conversations, but at a board level, it hasn't.
Okay.
Like I said, like you were saying earlier, we had an insurance advisory committee.
Yeah.
Say, hey, town manager, he was gonna do all that, so they.
It wasn't useful.
Oh, boy, feel that that's running right now.
Yeah, you're not helping here.
I believe, I'm not, I know you are correct. I'm very.
I know it was brought before the boards years and years and years ago, because remember Larry, well, Larry probably doesn't remember, but, the town voted to, allow the board to change the percentage that, they pay retirees medical insurance back in the 90s. And it had been brought up, I know, personally know several times, since back in the 90s. And, for whatever reasons, the select boards just chose not to make that decision and to increase it. So we're a small little group here, because there are more of us, just here, just making a request that, that we receive people. People among, yes, that's right, that's right,
Retirees got left behind.
exactly.
At that point,
Yeah.
and that wasn't right.
Yeah. All right, well, we will.
Thank you
look
for your
into it.
time.
Sure,
Appreciate it.
and figure out how much work is involved and when the time frame should be, and should we communicate with you?
Yeah,
Lisa?
please, yeah, and then I can reach out to whoever.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your
Great,
time, we
thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings, for your
Thank
time.
you. Great.
All right, the next item is a review of the draft provided facility management plan for Petition. So this is a revamped version, just, focus more on master planning and feasibility. So this is not up for us to approve tonight, this is for discussion next week. I just want to share it with you.
Discussion next week.
On the select board to approve as a warrant. Oh, that's when we go up or down.
What are we doing tonight then?
I'm just sharing with you, so you have any comments or about it? What should we do?
Who has oversight of the process? I think I know that. Is it revealed later on? Is it the board of trustees?
Over the process of the solicitation.
Advisory task. Yeah, that gets.
Hey, Wendy, this is Fred. I can't hear because there's some background chatter. I missed like the last minute or so. They must be talking out in the hall and the mic is picking it up.
You have the door shut?
I think it's a jar, but
Okay.
You just can't have them down.
Okay.
yeah. I think it's fake.
Fred, I was just sharing that this was a revamped version of the prior RFQ or the prior scope of work. And that it was just put in as a, matter of interest for the board. We're not voting on it tonight. The meeting next week with FinCom and Select Board is when we'll discuss it, and we would look for your input or any of the other trustees.
Right. Yes.
Okay. All right, so any questions, or we'll just table your discussion for next week, or?
Can, or I can throw my comments out, see if they get provided in the interim. No,
So the working group does not plan to meet again.
no, wait till.
But I speaking personally and as a member of the work, I think it'd be real helpful to hear your questions, just so a week from tonight, we
Come
can,
prepared to respond.
yeah, be prepared to respond.
Nothing significant, other than the beginning, my first question, and it gets answered later, was who has oversight and direction of the study? And then that's answered with the establishment of the advisory group. It says comprised of library and town staff. That's very broadly open-ended.
Yeah, so this is an RFQ, so it's not. You want it to be spelled out in this document, this is the bidding document.
I would think if we're going to approve it, I would like to know who the membership of this committee is. I think it's reasonable. I mean, it does say a select board, 2 members of library trustees and a local resident. But who are the library and the town staff? I mean, is it 10 people, 2 people? We don't know. That's rather open-ended.
Yeah, we did discuss it, the meeting, Angus, I don't recall you suggested, Corinne, obviously.
Yeah, Corinne is kind of, would be the point person, that's how it's been, and then Sam Johnson, our building inspector, is just invaluable knowledge on this, so we would definitely want him at the table.
And I don't have a problem, especially with those 2. I think they both have to be on the committee. I just don't want to find out that it's this open,
No, it would be a set,
undefined.
yeah,
Well, it's not defined, that's all I'm saying.
all right. So that is the procurement process.
Yeah, that's kind of the
Yeah.
vendor selection, but I think
Yeah.
the broader question, Chris, that I think you're touching on, and the working group has talked about this a number of times, and is kind of assuming the funding passes, assuming a vendor is selected and put under contract. How is that contract managed? How is that vendor managed? How is the process managed, and kind of under whose oversight and direction? Is that what you're getting at?
Ultimately, yes. Even though it's just an RFQ, or I think you have to discuss these issues at this point, so nobody's surprised later on.
Mhm. Okay, any other input?
Well, wait.
Huh? I mean, if it's, if there are questions or comments that it would be helpful for the working group members to be prepared to answer next week.
No, good.
All right. Fred, anything you want to say, or Corinne?
No, I just want to thank Chris for making a visit to the library so he could get an, a firsthand look at what's there and maybe implicitly what conceivably could be there.
All right, next item is the Break Hill Terrace Citizens Petition.
So actually, just if I could, Wendy, while Fred and Corinne are here, I think this has all been stated, but I just want to restate. So a week from tonight, Fred, is when there's a joint meeting of the FinCom and the Select Board. That's when they each vote their recommendations on all of the remaining warrant articles, including this one. So hopefully you had that date, but if you didn't, now you do, and we'll send you something in writing on that as well.
Yeah,
Do you have the date in your calendar?
Yeah, I had given it to them.
Good, okay, I thought you had, but I hadn't personally given it to you, so I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I think I know I've sent an email out to members of the library board that that is the date in which the merits of the warrant article will be discussed by the select board and the FinCom.
All right, great. Thank you.
All right, thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
the Break Hill Terrace Citizens Petition, I wanted to put this on here because there's been a lot of confusion about this. You know, we had asked the residents to, take responsibility for getting signatures on the citizens petition, realizing that it couldn't be on the ballot until the spring, but that the town would consider continuing snow removal services if it appeared that they were making good progress in getting signatures. What happened though is the petition was just dropped in the food mart, and there's really, you know, it just talks about the, you know, the, code that we're looking to pass. It didn't give any context and like what was being discussed, so, apparently there's been a lot of stuff on Facebook about it, and I've had a few calls myself, you know, people trying to understand what's going on, so I just thought it was important to kind of explain what's happening, see if you had any input on how, I mean, there's been also some suggestions that maybe this is not the best way to go. And given that Ross was not on the board when we decided to take this route, I just thought it might be good to have a discussion about whether we want to continue on this path or make changes.
Ross wasn't on the board?
He was on the FinCom, so he was kind of,
I know he's been in the loop. So,
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
My
but
first question is just for clarity to tell me, we'll do snow removal if they're in the process of getting things finished. I don't remember that.
Yeah, that's what we told them.
Did we?
Specifically.
I don't remember. I'm
I
not.
think you said it specifically. You wanted to see that we're making
No.
good progress on it. Yeah.
yeah, so that was one of the questions of one of the residents is how many signatures and by what date? And the board had not been that specific. The board had said if, and he said, I think he said October, but I don't think he said October 1st or October 31st. But if like in October, if it looks like
We
there's.
said by the time of the fall town meeting.
Okay, that if there's significant progress toward gaining the required signatures, that the board would entertain and consider, you know, continuing with snow operations this winter.
So this is the second year that we knew of the issue and we're patching it together, because that would predate Ross in the conversation.
That's
So
accurate.
we were up against this in a very squishy fashion last August, I think it
Last
was,
August,
a year ago.
That's
August.
correct, yep,
And
correct.
we basically said we would maintain it, or not maintain it, plow it last winter until we could figure out a resolution to this.
And at that time, there had been, you know, the initial direction coming out of roughly January of this year was a warrant article to study the condition of the road and to engage engineering and survey support to both basically look at the condition of the road, along with obviously Butch looking at it closely, and having funding available for surveyor to create a street acceptance plan. The initial path had been with the toward the town basically assessing the condition of the road as to whether the select board wanted to bring forward the road for public acceptance at the fall 2025 town meeting. There were a number of questions raised as that was going through the process, and midway through, the suggestion was that perhaps this MGL was a better route, and so that became, that kind of preempted the initial intent, that became the direction. And that's the direction that we continue to be on. But there is, yeah, I've been approached by residents as well who have concerns as to whether that's the right approach and feel that the town ought to be looking at accepting the road. And, you know, to the extent I've been part of those conversations, I've explained the questions and concerns that were raised last winter. But it definitely feels like there's like conversations all around, but not all of them are conformed and not all of them are like, so I think that's, yeah, to the extent you guys can either revisit and either reconfirm or revise your policy direction, I think would be helpful. Not necessarily tonight, but in the relatively near term.
Yeah, so one question that's been asked of me is if couldn't the town just accept the road based on the standards from that time rather than current standards? And. I mean, I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, legally, the town can accept whatever town meeting accepts. It has to meet certain, as you know, it has to meet certain procedural requirements. There's gotta be a street acceptance plan, there's gotta be a deed conveying the interest or an easement. Some towns only accept easements on public roads. They don't accept fee simple. Different towns do it differently, but there has to be, that street acceptance process has to be followed. That involves cost, it involves survey, it involves legal. Typically, the petitioner would either be the developer building, like with Major Boy Drive, the developer has done all that work to put that forward. Sometimes it might be a neighborhood looking to get their road accepted. It's not something in my experience that the town, it's not the town's job to propose a road for acceptance. That doesn't say the town could, if you wanted to do that, put resources toward that, you could. But typically, it's a private party petitioning the town to accept road as public. In terms of the condition of the road, it's gotta meet that procedural stuff, but if the town chose to accept a dirt road as a public road, it could. Whether that's a good idea or not is a whole different discussion.
Do we
But-
have a street acceptance policy or procedure here?
We follow the Mass General Law in terms of the procedure. In terms of the standards,
If we don't have our own, then you could accept really anything that has general law, but
yeah,
some places have
right, so
conditions, like
exactly.
butters letter, like.
yeah,
stuff.
exactly, yeah.
That would make it hard.
When you accept the road. When I was on planning board, they build a subdivision road, you hold them to the standards. Of a town road, so
Yes,
that's with the assumption that it will be accepted at a certain point by the
Yes.
town.
Yep.
That's not the case here, it's drastically different. You would be accepting a huge liability. To just accept this road, considering it's not to any of the standards, and that's a huge number.
Mhm.
And then. The problem becomes, well, what about everybody else on private roads in town? Once you. And as somebody on Facebook said, the Facebook conversation is very toxic, I'll start with that. But the one comment which I find very valid, the people who bought on that road knew at the time it was a private road. So there is no surprise on that, and that it's getting spun quite differently, and I find that. Say it's being spun differently.
Do you recall this whole conversation when you were on FinCom?
I do.
Yeah, do you have any thoughts on if this is the right path?
Yeah, so if the road wasn't to town standards, but it would essentially still have to follow the same process that Major Boy Drive is doing, right? So following that through logically, the planning board would probably make a negative recommendation, right? If it's not to the standard, why would they positively,
they could, but I mean, Amanda made a good point. A lot of towns do have adopted standards that are an objective basis for a planning board to either recommend or not recommend. In the absence of that here, I think you're probably right, but that's my guess. I mean, they could choose to recommend it. I mean,
But don't they have their own, like when they're reviewing site plan review?
oh, in terms of what a newly constructed subdivision road, absolutely there's standards.
Because that's in their decision.
Right.
They're laying that
Yeah,
out and they have to. follow.
yeah, but where this was, I think so this was. The recorded subdivision plan, I believe was from 1956. The statewide subdivision control law was adopted in 1955. So this is like one of the first subdivision roads certainly in West Newbury.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the same back then in terms of rules and regs, and it was at a very early stage of subdivision.
So how many signatures do they have?
I don't know, in communicating with, Jen Solis, who's kind of spearheading this, I suggested that they provide an update to the board at our next meeting, October 16th, as to where they were. And that would give us one more meeting before the end of the month and special town meeting to make a decision.
Why did it take months to even do anything? This is, and again, they're putting us under the gun. With their inactions, I guess.
But there is freaky stuff with the signatures, because if they submit them to us, then it starts the clock for when you have to have an election. So we don't want them to get the papers to us, at least for certification, they can tell you, give you
Yeah, I just asked
updates.
for an update.
But if they drop them off at the office, not within like the timing of the town election, then you have to have special election.
Are you certain about that? I'm not certain about
That
that,
was
because
5 days.
the statute says at the next annual election, and it specifically says the next annual election.
Okay, I'm gonna check that, if
Yeah.
there are two things, but.
So do we wanna move forward with this approach, or do we wanna consider something different? I'm just looking for confirmation, because we were not a board at the time when we decided, so,
Well, I guess if I agreed to the last time, I'd have to agree to this time, I just don't recall that, but
okay. I mean, agreeing with the approach of following this MGL versus, considering whether to accept it. As a-
I have very little interest in accepting, simply because the process is going to be very, very cumbersome. It's not anybody's work plan, and the cost is gonna be staggering. So
Just to do the
you're
process.
gonna have to survey it, you're gonna have to legal, that's gonna not be insignificant.
Yeah.
And then at some point, you're gonna own and have to upgrade it. So. There's a plan which we were going down that path. It was supposed to be in cooperation with the residents of the road.
Yeah.
To accommodate them to do snow removal, but. It's kind of lackluster at this point.
Mhm.
And I think that's the plan to keep following, but
If I could, Wendy, and I'm sure you all have been approached with similar concerns, and I'm sure you've thought of them yourself. But if the statute was adopted by, at the next election, I've been approached by, resident, or knowledgeable resident with significant concern that if the town adopted that MGL, even though town council has confirmed 100%, the select board as the roadway commissioners would retain authority to apply that wherever you saw fit. Just because that MGL was accepted, it does not mean the town's provided stone and ice to every private road. You could then, as a matter of policy, define which road or roads you're providing those services. And she also said in her opinion that could be updated annually. So just because this board or the next board does it, wouldn't find the board in 5 or 10 or 15 years if you guys aren't still on the board at that time. So it really, even if the MGL is adopted, the select board always retains policy direction of where to apply it. The concern that I've been approached by, which I believe is a very valid concern, is that if the MGL was accepted, it is inevitable that you will be petitioned by other residents of other private roads. And whether this board or future boards would then have the legal authority to provide snow and ice on those roads. And so whether that's a good thing or not a good thing is something you need to decide, but I think it's all but certain that you would be inviting those kinds of requests from other.
I've already heard the grumblings.
Yeah.
I think we looked at this, but I don't recall how many other private roads there are in town.
That was my question next,
Yeah.
how many are there?
It was part of the conversation a year and a half ago, but I don't remember what the answer was.
There is a comprehensive report that the town had done in 1994 by an engineering firm.
Yeah.
And that listed either 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Since that time, there are more because there are a number of, some of the OSPDs have been private. So we could update that, and I know Butch maintains a list, so I'm adding that, we can
Okay.
get you that, how many private roads. If I had to guess, it's gonna be between 8 and 15,
It seems.
probably between 8 and 14.
Yeah. So does that change your thinking at all, Chris, that all the other residents on town road are private roads within the one?
I would assume they will.
Yeah. So you don't see that as a liability?
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
So what do you plan to be, say, as we told them the plan last year was they were gonna be told that they were gonna have to, that the town was gonna stop taking care of the road. And we sort of caved in. We're back at that same point. So what do you have thoughts on it?
I thought this was a brilliant solution to the situation we had, so I'm a little, taken aback that it's become such a lightning rod, Because the thought of doing the study to find out how much it would cost to bring it up to town standards and then trying to get the butters to pay half and we pay half, that just seemed fraught with problems. And then how do you pay for that? Upgrading.
I say leave it as, I mean, personally, leave it as a private business. Do we really have with it?
Well, because we have property on the other side that's provides.
We have property on the side, that whole argument about going to the center, I find hollow.
I know you do, but that's what legal,
Well, they cut a subdivision out, and that's the property line, and then all of a sudden you go into the middle of the road. Legal or not, I still don't have a significant interest in saying the town should own that road anyway.
And Chris, I think what I recall from prior comments you've made that at least some of your perspective on that comes from having been very involved with the decision to acquire the Craven property and no disclosure at that point as to acquiring that property.
No conversation whatsoever about that at the time, that would have, I think, given us a little pause, I'm not sure it would have changed anything. It's also very curious, if somebody carves out their property and runs a road on the border, that then the abutter wants to the center. And that's very strange. Saying because you decide you have a subdivision, you put a road there, the abutter, sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, wants to the center of the road. You could give somebody more frontage to build it's a very curious conversation legally too.
all right, so what do we want to do? Proceed or pull back, Ross, any thoughts?
You mean proceed with snow removal or?
Proceed with this approach of passing the MGL and.
Because once we take one, then we own 8 to 15.
I mean, I don't really see that as a problem. I mean, I think if we were to do that, the select board should develop a policy about what kind of road or what conditions we would accept the road first,
We're not talking accepting a road, are we? We're talking.
No, I'm
plowing.
sorry, I should have used that word. I'm talking,
Snow.
agreeing to do snow removal.
And just one thing, just so, I think you said, should we go forward or not? Under this MGL, if 200 signatures are submitted and confirmed by the clerk's office, it will go to the ballot. If that does not happen, it will not go to the ballot because this board has no authority to put it to a ballot. So whether it goes to the voters or not is really out of your hands. What is in your hands is what's going to be your policy position if it goes to a ballot as to whether to recommend it or not. I believe that's correct.
I have a question on the ballot language, because this says Break Hill Terrace Citizens Petition. The MGL is not specific for that.
Correct.
So they could do all the work and get all the signatures and submit it, and then the MGL could pass, and then their road still might not get
That's correct.
plowed
That's a
if
fair
you
point,
guys
yeah.
don't want to. So I think it should just be clarified that this MGL is just being accepted for giving the select board the authority to decide which streets they want to do. Passage of this doesn't guarantee Break Hill over any other unaccepted street. Does that make sense kind of? Because if I was a neighbor on another private street, I'd be like, well, I could have collected the signatures too and had my street plowed. So it should just be.
I think that's a good point. I mean, we put this on here kind of because conversationally,
Yeah.
that's kind of how it's been understood, but I think legally you are absolutely correct. The MGL is certainly not specific to that or any other road, and even if this board, in the spirit of all that went on, or would still go on, even if this board provided winter operations, it's not binding on a future board.
And also, are we legally allowed to, because I remember this came up in Amesbury like a month ago, I mean, it just
You were
gone.
correct, no, you're right.
Can't
I know
provide
where you're going with
services.
this. Oh,
So-
I thought you were going somewhere else, I
Oh,
had
no.
a different point, but
Okay,
you make your point,
I'm not sure if you're allowed,
we're not allowed to provide services.
okay, all right.
What is this?
Well, we can't expend public resources on a private road. The thorny issue here is that the town had been doing this for decades and decades, so that's where we're in this nebulous area.
Funding.
But yeah, legally, you know, no more than we can send DPW to plow Chris's driveway, much as
We
he
can,
asks.
I'll stop you.
Much as he pleads with us to do that, we just say, sorry, Chris. we
So then
can't."
why wait this point? We adopt this law, and we then legally can't implement it.
No, right.
No, if the law was.
Oh, if we accept it, then we can do it.
Correct,
Okay, so we know that. That's why we're at this point.
right, yeah,
Okay,
but as far as this winter, yeah.
It's not,
yeah,
The point I was gonna make, which I thought you were going here, and I think I'm correct, but you can validate this, but. If this gets onto the ballot, I said a few minutes ago, you can decide how you wanna recommend it, but in fact, I don't think that's true. Because if this gets on the ballot, that's where this whole electioneering comes in,
oh, yeah.
where once it's a ballot question. You as a board actually have to, you as individuals can take whatever position you want, but you as a board, once something is on the ballot, that's different from a town
Town
meeting
meeting, yeah.
article. Town meeting, or you certainly can and should. A ballot question triggers a whole different section of state law under campaign finance reform. Where you really cannot take a position as a board as to how the voters should vote. That's what I thought.
Yep, nope, but that's a great point.
So we would just be preparing a policy.
Yep.
About how we would implement this if it was passed.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah, and you as individuals obviously can exercise your right to free speech,
Yeah.
but as a board, you have to be more cautious.
So if it gets on the ballot, we can't take a position as a board, but we would develop a policy and still be able to decide whether or not we do snow removal.
Correct,
If it was passed.
if it was passed.
which
it
roads
passed
we
the
would,
ballot.
which roads we would do snow removal on.
But the whole reason they're trying to get it on the ballot is so that they don't have to do snow removal, right? So if we were to come up with a policy prior to it getting on the ballot, it may or may not support them going forward with MGL.
Well, we technically should be paying for it now.
Well, yeah, we know that.
Yeah, so.
Oh, you mean, yes, yeah.
Right now,
that's
so,
another part,
yeah.
that also begs the question then too about if to do a road acceptance, then we have to pay for a survey and legal on the property we shouldn't be paying for also. Again, this is why subdivisions, like you say, the developer, they pay it, they present it with the documents, and then they make the request.
Yeah.
Suggestions?
Well, I mean, we've already set this in motion, so, and it's really out of our hands. It's just unfortunate that we're taking on a beat for it. No,
Nothing new.
yeah,
Chris, I think you might watch, or at least your household might watch Facebook maybe more closely than I do. Do you think that what my office posted a couple of Fridays ago, did that help with a legal opinion, or did that,
I think it helped the people who wanted to look at it legitimately, yeah.
okay.
I mean, I think it tamped down the discussion.
It is a complicated issue.
so what is the general tenor then?
It wasn't pleasant, it was,
What's the beef? I mean, why do they think it's
they don't
negative?
think we should touch it. It's a private road, we would be.
Oh, so it's not supportive of,
No, it's not saying select, well, basically saying, what are we even engaging on? Yeah.
so it's not supportive of the town passing this.
There were some comments that were on the other end.
Maybe a few, most of them, they were,
Okay,
probably to get your attention because they weren't very pleasant.
yeah,
It's like, you don't have to be that nasty, which side of the issue on, just.
Yeah.
You know, but the hate started flowing real fast.
yeah, I mean, there were some more on the side of why is the town giving these residents a hard time, and they've been paying it all these years, why don't they just keep doing it?
Yeah. All right. So I guess we should work on a policy. I mean,
Personally, I think that would be premature, and I would even wanna check, I don't wanna like be too. you know, but we have to be, I mean, the campaign finance stuff is real and it's gotta be, you know, so I would even wanna look into, would it be even appropriate to do that before it passed, because could that be viewed as
There's very strict
favoring one?
rules
Yeah,
about
very strict rules.
municipal employees advocating or taking positions on ballot questions on. Town time, but technically it's like.
Because
well,
currently
it's
not called,
town
it's not a
time.
ballot question currently.
No.
So would that be after passage then?
No, I mean, one thing that I think could be helpful, in the present moment, although not in the next few days or weeks, because we have work to do, but I think that, you know, some kind of like, if there would be a way to like provide some kind of FAQ that, because between the legal opinion from August of 2024, which is publicly available and on the town website, the other legal opinion from March 28th of 2025, the lengthy document that my office put together to ask those questions, the many documents we've assembled, including, for instance, you know, meeting minutes from the early 2000s where there was concern expressed by the former DPW director as to the condition of the road. We have a huge amount of information. And I understand not everybody is gonna go and like sift through that, so. I'm not volunteering to do this because I really don't have time, but I think if there's a way, maybe over the next 6 or 8 weeks, once things hopefully slow down a little bit. But to create some kind of synopsis, because I do think there's like a lot of misinformation and we have so much information. It's just, and it's all on the website. It's all publicly available. People can find it. I know Wendy, you've sent out significant chunks of information. I've sent out significant chunks of information, but to do that on a like per person basis, it's just, it's not only inefficient use of our time, it's also not really, doesn't really help, because I think as the broader community, I think there's a lot of misinformation on this issue.
What about a report at town meeting?
That's a great idea. That's a great idea, because we could put together some key points.
Yeah,
And one of the most important points, at least in my view, is that when the town did, through town meeting, did vote to appropriate a small amount of funds in 2005 to do some pavement repairs, they did so knowing that this was a private road. It's in the minutes, it's in the finance committee booklet that was before the town meeting voters, and with the expectation that the then DPW director and then planning board was going to then look into this further. I think that's a really important thing for people to understand, is that I think when they did that, whether it was the right or the wrong thing to do, I think the voters had an expectation that this was not gonna be a loose end, and it was only that it, you know, came up 19 years later that it was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, they never did the follow-up that the written record clearly says was expected in 2005.
okay. So,
How do we proceed short term, I mean, this winter?
well, I guess we need to go back in the minutes. I'm pretty confident we said that we would, but if you think we
No,
don't.
I'm not questioning that, I didn't know if that's the direction, just asking.
That was my understanding, but Ross, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do not remember.
Yeah.
You said if they were getting signatures, we don't know what that means.
Yeah, so I asked her to provide a report to us at our next meeting on the 16th. And maybe we should talk about what substantial progress means to us before
Right.
that date. To me, it means half or more. What does it mean to you?
That would be a reasonable interpretation.
Yeah. Chris?
I'm not sure what means because of it. Why didn't they start months ago? That's my question. They were holding us hostage again. I hate this. I don't feel like they move forward in a timely fashion, so I don't. Again, I don't,
So that, maybe that means they have to work extra hard in the next 2 weeks to get a signature. So what benchmark would you use to feel confident that you're gonna be able to?
it isn't a number, it's
It's a-
respect of the time frame,
Yeah.
which was not respected. again, I don't logistically. I don't see it as a big deal for the town to plow. I don't say it's already baked into the budget, it is, because it's
Yeah.
the same budget as last year, they've done it and everything else.
Right.
That's not the problem, I just think. I wish they would have respected the request and started the process earlier.
Alright. So we will make a decision at the next meeting then, so that should be an action item, yes. Is that something that somebody in your office can look up to confirm that we did make that?
Yep.
Next item is the public hearing, next Tuesday, the chair did request that I make a presentation at the public hearing on behalf of the select board, given that the planning board is not the proponent of this article. So I just want to see, get your input, if there's anything particular you think would be useful or relevant in my presentation. Hopefully you're in agreement with me doing that. Okay.
I just always feel bad that you have to, but that said, it'll be a good presentation, and I know it will be very helpful, so definitely agree with.
I mean, what are the key points for you? I mean, I don't want to go all through how we selected the parcels, but I think the
Well, I think
point
you
is
did
that
that in a nutshell. I
it was an
think
exhaustive
the
process.
committee is, because it was a good group. How you got there, but I think the most important thing is that the parcel you arrived at is one that was not on the radar that I recall being at any time before.
Yeah.
Or somebody else said to me, oh, that was before, nobody listened, okay. But that's,
There is nobody else. that-
I'm just saying carefully, that's how I worded it, so. But I think the parcel is exceptional in the fact that it can accommodate the MBTA, both the regulation and the spirit. I legitimately think that if the housing authority with certain funding at a state or federal level could potentially in the future build that parcel and do it as an affordable, I think that's pretty key to why I really think that's a great parcel for it,
Mhm.
so. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
and the town has a bit of control or, a little more control than otherwise.
Yeah.
I'm really glad to hear you say that, Chris, because I totally agree with what you said. And I think that is a good thing to make sure, this idea that the housing authority absolutely could. And just because the bylaw requires a minimum of 10% doesn't mean obviously, they're not gonna do a 90% market rate development. But just because the bylaw requires 10, they or any other proponent could come in at, way higher percentage. So I think
I guess to
that's,
say 50, I mean, they really could, I
Of
would think
course,
that should be
yeah.
a planned objective of
Yeah.
it at some point.
Mhm.
With financial assistance,
Of
we
course.
can offer in town.
Right.
But I just think it's a brilliant opportunity all around.
Any other points?
Yeah, if we don't do it, your tax bill's going up,
Yeah.
or the level of service you've been getting is going down. As Angus said last time, it's roughly $600,000 a year that we've been the benefit of, so. There are financial consequences too. We don't know what the extent of those will be going forward.
Yeah, I think you probably all saw, we did update that memo and I sent it around this morning. That's actually something Jenny and I have been working on for a couple of weeks and wanted to get that into their packet today for their hearing on Tuesday, but that's got the latest information about the state funding the town's received over the last 5.5 fiscal years.
Anything about the bylaw itself?
Honestly, I didn't pay much attention to it this go around, because we had it the last time. and-
Yeah, they're really only kind of ministerial changes to it, nothing substantive, I don't think. Okay. Anything else on that, Angus?
Not for me.
Okay. Next item is select board and town manager, division of labor.
So, so I just put this back in circulation. I know I shared this a couple of times. I think it's a good thing
You
for.
don't have it online, do you, to share?
No, I don't. But I think it's a good thing to have handy because I think it's a good kind of at a glance. Sets out the roles between the board and the manager. So since it's not up on the screen, I'll just read it to the record. So the board's role And it goes through basically 3 tiers of goals, policy, and management. So the board's role with regard to goals, determine goals and direction of the community, understand, amend, and approve the budget, make decisions on policies, major projects, large contracts, respond to constituent concerns by checking through the manager, oversight in a broad sense of the accomplishment of large outcomes, and selection and evaluation of the town manager. The manager's role, again, from goals, policy, management, is provide advice and information, ensure that the board undertakes the appropriate planning process, prepares the budget for approval, does background work, presents options and makes recommendations, gets answers for board members from the appropriate departments, establishes procedure for managing the organization. Again, distinction between policy and procedure, manages the resources to support and carry out the decisions of the board, and hires and manages all other personnel. It's not quite as simple here in West Newbury because we don't have a town charter, and there are some personnel appointments that are outside of my office. There's a couple of appointments this board makes, as well as all police appointments the select board makes, and there are other appointing authorities in the town, including Board of Health, Library Director, and others. But generally, this is a good encapsulation of information. So, with regard to, for instance, management of personnel, that's something that's squarely in the town manager's responsibility and authority within the Town Manager Act. Obviously, it's a small town, people have questions. Why did this happen? Why did that happen? And, have been and will always be circumspect on anything to do with that, because not only is that appropriate for me to be that way, but it's also respectful of employees and employees' rights and certain applicable laws that actually preclude the discussion of personnel matters in a public meeting. And so I know out in the community, sometimes people have questions about this or that, and I do want to reassure the community and the voters. The select board did a number of years ago designate a member, and at that time it was Wendy, and it remains Wendy, as essentially the select board's personnel liaison. So I do keep Wendy as the board's personnel liaison, fully apprised of all personnel matters. And she's got all the information she needs, and can do her own research and get more information. So the board, through their designee, is fully apprised of personnel matters, but those are not things that are shared with the quorum of the board or in public meetings, really for reasons of legal reasons and fairness, and just what's appropriate in the form of government that we have.
So in order for a discussion about an employee to be in a public meeting, they would need a certain number of days' notice, and they would be entitled to have counsel present, right?
That's correct, not just entitled, but yeah, so if a specific employee is to be a subject of discussion in a public meeting, under the open meeting law, they are absolutely entitled to 48 hours advance written notice that they will be the subject of discussion. And that notice by law has to notify the employee in writing that they will be the subject of discussion, that they have a right to appear, that they have a right to have counsel present. That has to be put in writing. So you can see why that doesn't happen, because except for, I would be speculating on when that might ever be appropriate. And obviously, if there was like significant malfeasance, a crime was committed, something like that. But that's not something you invoke for, routine personnel matters, so really anything but the most extreme situation. So, and that's something that is not only crystal clear in the law, but has been reaffirmed with town council over the years, and. I think he gave some advice a number of years ago. That basically that's why towns have town managers, is to deal with that stuff, because it gets very messy. And not just messy, but potential, legal exposure. If personnel matters start getting kicked around in a public meeting, that is not where this town or any town wants to be.
So we didn't formally reappoint me to be the personnel liaison. I mean, is that something that we should consider at a future meeting, or are you guys fine with me continuing to do that?
I'm not taking it. Didn't we go through all appointments at the beginning of the year, as they were before?
Did we say that?
I thought we did,
Okay.
just to make.
Maybe we'll cover.
Yeah, it wasn't in that
It wasn't
memo,
listed.
but I think we do want to get that in for next go around, because it has not changed, and certainly the practice hasn't changed, which is that, Wendy's my sounding board, and I keep her apprised, and as is, by the way, my responsibility on the Town Manager Act. If you read that, part of my responsibility is keep the board fully apprised of the matters that my office is working on, which I certainly make every effort to do, and for the most part, those are shared with the full board. But for, reasons of, personnel issues or certain things are reviewed with a designee for very specific reasons.
And that also coincided with eliminating the personnel committee.
Correct.
Right, that was when that
Yeah.
decision was made.
Which, as I think you all know, had been effectively defunct for many, many years before I got here. So by eliminating that committee, it was not, in fact, eliminating it. It was legally eliminating a committee, but in fact, it was basically eliminating bylaw, or created a committee that had not been functional for many, many years.
Okay, well, I think this is good because it, emphasizes the direction we want to go, which is to leave the operations in Angus's hand and work on policy stuff. So I think it's a good reminder. What?
I think it's great, it's simple, it's
Yeah.
exactly the way it should be.
No. Good. All right, no course.
Before we go to
Sure.
executive session, I go back to the letter from the Executive Office, Housing Livable Communities.
Yeah.
They talked about the approval of it and everything. They said the one bullet point, there are discrepancies between the land areas of the submitted compliance model and the submitted GIS.
That's an MVPC issue.
That has been
That
corrected.
has been corrected, yeah, basically this was with the addition of the shape file for the easement area. It was off by 0.2 acres. So there is an email thread between Ian Burns and HLC. I didn't put it in because it's pretty lengthy. I did send it to Chris Riley at the town planner, and I asked him to put together a memo, because it's just like 7 pages of email that is really very wonky, but it's a GIS issue.
I was going to do a simple.
And it has been resolved, and we have it in writing from HLC that it's resolved.
Excellent.
Future agenda items. One thing I wanted to, float was, the hunting permission for Stewart. Angus sent me his stuff from Hamden, and I think, I just don't feel like we have enough time to put together a whole program in order to give him permission. So I would like to propose grandfathering him on some of the Brook property for, bow hunting, and if you are in agreement with that, I'll invite him to come to the next meeting, we can discuss it.
Just for 1 year.
Yes.
Okay.
It's
Say
a
grandpa.
great thing.
In essence, that's what we're trying to accomplish anyways.
Right, does that sound all right to you? All right, so I'll invite him to come. So I would like to do it next week, at 5:30 before the FinCom meeting, if that's all right, it should be fairly short.
Yeah.
So I'll put together, there's the landowner's permission form that they have to carry with them. There's plenty of templates online, so I'll just draft something like that and we can approve it. Or we can consider it and approve it if you so choose. All right, any other future agenda items?
I have just maybe for next week, because we got action item F, we didn't take any action, do you want your motion to continue that to the meeting on 5:30, the Miller?
Not next week, we'll put it to the meeting on the 16th.
Okay, so you want to make a motion?
I don't think it's not a public hearing, so the chair can put it on a future agenda.
Not according to parliamentary procedure, we have items that. Maybe, oh,
Alright, we can vote.
no,
You wanna make a motion, Chris?
Want to make a motion to continue the,
Well, to put that item on the
Yeah.
October 16th agenda.
item C.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
2.F, Mill Pond Committee projects to the town work plan to the meeting date of, what is it?
October 16th.
16th.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And they'll be notified. So that if they wanna have somebody here, they will. If they don't.
Yep, yep.
If they don't, we're done.
Yeah.
It's simple.
The other item, I've been contacted by, Representative Ramos, who said the Zoom meeting with me tomorrow, so I don't know what that's about. If there's anything you want me to convey, I'm happy to do that. Any input for our rep? Questions?
No idea what to input on.
All right. So. Okay, I move that we recess into executive session. MGL chapter 38, section 21A2 and A7.
Second.
All in favor? Reed, aye.
Captain Bob, aye.
Right.
All right, so the board has recessed to executive session and will reconvene an open session for the sole purpose of adjourn. Good night.